Picture a small island pushing up through the deep blue Aegean Sea, white cube houses stacked along a volcanic hillside like sugar cubes left in the sun, every wall so bright it makes you squint, even in a photograph. The thermometer nailed to the shaded wall outside reads 95 degrees. A dog lying on the stone path has pressed itself flat against the ground, searching for coolness that the ground does not have. But step through the low wooden doorway of any one of those white houses, and the air changes instantly. It sits at 72 degrees, still and calm, the way air feels inside a cave. No compressor hums in the corner, no fan turns on the ceiling, no glowing thermostat waits on the wall. The only thing standing between the people inside that house and the furnace outside is a thin coat of white powder, mixed with water in a clay pot and brushed onto stone with a bundle of horsehair. That powder costs almost nothing. It has existed for over 4,000 years, and it works better than the machine humming in your wall right now. That is not a sales claim written on a box. That is a temperature reading recorded by instruments in a peer-reviewed laboratory, certified on paper by Guinness World Records, and backed by the unbroken testimony of every Mediterranean civilization that has ever survived a summer. This is the full story of the cheapest cooling solution humanity has ever produced. What it is, where it came from, how it works, why it quietly disappeared from the conversation, and exactly what you can do with it starting this week. To understand where this begins, you have to leave the present entirely and stand on a cliff in 1500 BC. You are on the island of Crete. The volcanic rock beneath your sandals is so hot from the afternoon sun that you can feel it through the leather. The Minoan settlement around you is built from the same dark stone, walls cut from the hillside, absorbing every ray of heat the sky throws at them from sunrise to sunset, radiating it back into the interior all night long like a slow oven that never fully cools. The people living inside these walls are not comfortable. They are cooking, but they are also watching. A Minoan builder notices that the pale white shell of a broken sea urchin left on a rock stays cool enough to touch at noon while the dark stone beside it burns his palm. He notices that the limestone cliffs on the island's eastern face, pale and bright, never seem to hold heat the way the dark basalt formations to the west do. He is not a physicist. He does not own a thermometer, but he understands what he is seeing. Limestone is everywhere on Crete. You can dig it from the hillside with a chisel. The Minoans burned it in simple clay kilns, piling the rock over wood fires and letting it roast for days until the chemical bonds inside it broke apart and it crumbled into a fine white powder, calcium oxide, what we call quicklime. They poured water over it and it hissed and steamed violently, the chemical reaction releasing enough heat to blister skin, transforming into a soft white paste, calcium hydroxide, what we call hydrated lime or slaked lime. They thinned this paste further with more water until it ran like milk from the brush, and painted it onto every wall and roof surface facing the open sky. Stand inside one of those treated homes on a 95-degree afternoon, and the air holds steady at 72 degrees. The roof above you is bouncing the sun away instead of drinking it in. The walls beside you are cool to the touch. The family sleeping inside that house is not suffering. They are comfortable in a world that has no electricity, no refrigerant, and no machinery of any kind, simply because someone once noticed that white things stay cooler than dark ones and decided to make their entire house white. The technique did not stay on Crete. Watch it move. A Phoenician trader docks his boat at a Greek island port and walks through a village where every surface gleams white under the noon sun. He feels the difference the moment he steps from the blazing harbor lane into a whitewashed courtyard. The air drops, the shade deepens. The stone under his hand is not burning. He carries that observation the way traders carry everything useful across the water to the next port and the one after that. By 400 BC, walk any street in any Greek town, Athens, Santorini, Mykonos, Rhodes, and every house along every lane wears the same bright coat. Women with wide brushes work their way up exterior walls in the early morning before the heat arrives, their buckets of lime wash leaving bright streaks on stone that dry within an hour to a hard, chalk-white finish. This is not decoration. This is the same reason a shepherd in a white robe stays cooler than one in dark wool. The color is doing thermal work. The house reflects the summer. The people inside survive it. The Romans watched this and did what Romans always did with things that worked. They scaled it. Roman engineers mixed lime into the plaster coating every exterior surface of every building they raised across 3 continents, from the sun-hammered villas of North Africa where summer temperatures touched 110 degrees, to the relatively mild hillsides of central Italy, to the damp cold of Roman Britain, where the white walls served a different purpose entirely, bouncing the scarce northern light into dark interiors. Every gleaming white structure you have ever seen in a painting of the Roman world was not painted white for beauty. It was engineered white for temperature. Picture a Roman street in Pompeii the morning before Vesuvius. Every building face wears a smooth white lime render, the morning sun glancing off the surfaces and scattering into the narrow lane below rather than soaking into the stone and building up heat through the day. The baker's shop is already warm from his oven, but the apartment above it, its walls bright with fresh lime, stays cool enough that the baker's family sleeps comfortably until the bread smell wakes them. This is not coincidence. This is a building technology deployed deliberately and maintained annually by every person who benefits from it. That tradition ran continuously for 2,000 years without a single interruption. The white villages of southern Spain still shimmer in summer photographs. The Kasbah towns of Morocco still blind you at midday with their reflected light. The hillside clusters of southern Italy still rise like stacked chalk from the green landscape around them. The iconic white walls of the Greek islands are not a tourist aesthetic invented for postcards. They are a 4,000-year-old cooling system that has never once stopped working. Now, step out of ancient history and onto a flat rooftop in California in 1973. A researcher from Lawrence Berkeley National Laboratory is standing on a commercial building outside of Oakland, holding a surface thermometer in each hand. Behind him sits a section of rooftop he painted last week with a simple mixture: powdered limestone combined with water, the recipe unchanged from what Greek grandmothers had been using for 3,000 years. Beside it, close enough to touch, sits an identical section of roof, left dark and untreated. He presses one thermometer against the white surface and one against the dark surface and reads them at the same moment, on the same afternoon, under the same sky. The difference is 40 degrees Fahrenheit. He stands there for a moment looking at both readings, because 40 degrees is not a rounding error. It is not a margin. It is the difference between a comfortable room and a room you cannot sleep in. He takes the readings down from the roof and measures the interior temperature of the building beneath the white section, and the interior temperature of the building beneath the dark section. The white side is 8 degrees cooler inside. For the entire summer, no air conditioning unit in that building ever activates. A $14 bag of hydrated lime sitting on a hardware store shelf has outperformed a $5,000 machine. This result was recorded, published, and quietly filed away. The science did not vanish. It sat in a folder in an archive and waited for someone to pick it up again. That person worked at a university in Indiana, and he would not show up for another 48 years. Picture a materials science laboratory at Purdue University in 2021. The room is cold and white and very quiet, lit by the flat hum of fluorescent tubes, lined with instruments that measure things invisible to human senses. Spectrometers, reading the wavelength of reflected light. Thermal sensors, recording surface temperatures to fractions of a degree. Cameras, imaging surfaces and frequencies the human eye cannot see. Professor Shulan Ruan has spent years at this bench. His team has been engineering a paint formula built not from lime, but from barium sulfate particles, the same compound used to make the white pigment in commercial products, but sized and shaped and suspended in a carrier liquid with extraordinary precision. The goal is to reflect not just the visible spectrum of sunlight that makes something look white to your eye, but the near-infrared wavelengths that carry most of the sun's heat, and that conventional white paint absorbs completely without you ever knowing. The formula his team produces reflects 98.1% of all incoming solar radiation. Hold that number against the best commercial white paint available in any store, which reflects roughly 80 to 85%. That remaining 15 to 20% that commercial white absorbs is your attic heat. It is your air conditioning bill. It is the difference between a comfortable house and one that runs its cooling system 6 hours a day all summer. Ruan's formula closes almost that entire gap. But the result that nobody expected is what happens at the surface temperature itself. The roof, coated with this formula, does not merely stay cool. On a sunny afternoon, it measures 8 degrees cooler than the open air around it. Not cooler than the roof beside it, cooler than the air. At night, when the surface is purely radiating stored energy away into the cold sky above, that gap grows to 19 degrees below the surrounding air temperature. Ruan sits down and calculates the cooling output of this coating applied to a standard 1,000 square foot roof. The number he writes on his notepad is 10 kilowatts of continuous cooling power. He looks at it for a moment and then looks up the average output of a residential central air conditioning unit. It sits between 3 and 5 kilowatts. A coat of paint generates more than twice the cooling power of the machine your neighbors are paying $200 a month to run. The Guinness Book of World Records sent an official adjudicator to Purdue, reviewed the methodology, examined the instruments, and certified this formula as the whitest surface ever created on Earth. CNN ran the story. The Smithsonian wrote about it. Science journals published the peer-reviewed data. Every major media outlet in the world ran the headline for a news cycle. And then the story left the front page. And almost nothing in the industry changed at all. To understand why nothing changed, stand inside a paint factory for a moment. The conveyor line runs day and night, filling cans with product formulated to cover well on the first coat, dry to a smooth finish, hold its color for 5 years, and begin fading in year 6. That fade is not a failure of chemistry. The chemistry to make a coating last 20 years has existed for decades. The fade is a schedule. The schedule on which you return to the store, buy more product, and keep the line running. The global paint industry turns over more than $200 billion every year. Sherwin-Williams alone operates over 5,000 retail locations. The business model printed into every can of paint on every shelf in every one of those stores is a cycle of purchase and repurchase, spaced at intervals short enough to keep revenue continuous. A lime coating that a homeowner mixes in a bucket for $14, applies in an afternoon, and reapplies once every 2 or 3 years for the same $14 represents a revenue event so small it does not appear in any quarterly earnings report anywhere. Now stand inside a different kind of building, the glass headquarters of a major HVAC manufacturer. The engineers here are extraordinary. The machines they design are marvels of thermodynamic efficiency. And every single one of those machines is purchased, installed, serviced annually, repaired at unpredictable intervals, and replaced every 15 to 20 years, generating a river of revenue at every step. The American air conditioning market alone exceeds $17 billion per year, and that figure does not include the electricity cost of running the equipment. Hundreds of billions more flowing through utility companies every summer, metered and billed to every household that runs a compressor from June through September. You cannot patent a limestone quarry. You cannot trademark the calcium hydroxide molecule. You cannot install a meter on a bucket of powder mixed with tap water in a homeowner's backyard. And anything that cannot be metered, billed, and renewed on a schedule cannot generate the kind of revenue that justifies a marketing budget, a retail placement, a building code endorsement, or inclusion in any contractor's standard recommendation list. So it is not included, not banned, not destroyed, just absent, left off the list, not mentioned in the brochure, not taught in the trade school, not written into the building code that the industry stakeholders helped draft, and homeowners associations in states across the country whose architectural guidelines are shaped by the same aesthetic preferences that the industry spent decades promoting as normal, have written rules explicitly prohibiting highly reflective roofing surfaces, requiring instead the earth tones and dark grays that absorb the maximum possible solar heat, and mathematically guarantee that every house in the neighborhood needs mechanical cooling from May through October. Those rules are sitting in the HOA documents and subdivisions right now. You can find them. They are real. And the color they mandate is the color of a hot roof. Now picture a house in Texas on a July afternoon. Walk up to it from the street. The asphalt shingles on the roof are a standard dark gray. The color that the roofing industry's standard catalog calls weathered wood or charcoal or estate gray, the color that absorbs 90% of the sunlight, hitting it from dawn to dusk. Open the attic hatch from inside and the heat that rolls down over you is physical. You feel it on your face like opening an oven door. A thermometer hung from a rafter reads 140 degrees Fahrenheit. The insulation between the rafters and the ceiling below is doing its best, but it is fighting a losing battle against a surface that has been baking for 8 hours and will not stop until after sunset. The air conditioning unit mounted in the hallway runs in long, continuous cycles, fighting to hold the living space at 76 degrees against a ceiling that is radiating heat downward like a griddle. The homeowner in this house goes to a hardware store and loads 2 50-pound bags of Type S hydrated lime into his cart. The bags are white and heavy, and they sit in the back of his truck next to a cheap roller and a plastic bucket. He pays somewhere between $14 and $28 at the register and drives home. He fills the bucket at his garden hose. He tears open the first bag and pours the white powder slowly into the water, stirring with a wooden stick until the mixture runs smooth and thin, the color and weight of whole milk, no lumps, no dry pockets. He climbs his ladder to the roof in the early morning before the day's heat arrives, loads the roller, and begins at the ridge, working in long, even strokes down toward the gutters, the white surface appearing behind the roller like snow settling on a hillside. The first coat dries overnight. He watches it from the backyard as the evening cools, the roof going from wet white to a dry, hard chalk finish that catches the last light of the day and glows faintly. The next morning he goes up again with the second coat, the roller moving faster now over the sealed surface, the coverage more even. He climbs down, puts the bucket away, coils the hose, and goes inside. 3 days later, he opens the attic hatch again. The thermometer on the rafter reads 97 degrees. Not 140, not the inside of an oven. 97 degrees on a July afternoon in Texas. Warm, yes, but a completely different category of warm. The insulation beneath it is no longer overwhelmed. The ceiling is no longer radiating downward heat. The air conditioning unit, for the first time all summer, runs in short cycles and then goes quiet. His indoor temperature is 10 degrees cooler than it was before the $28 afternoon on his roof. By September, when he adds up his electricity bills and compares them to the same months the year before, the number he writes down is $200 saved, from 2 bags of powder and 1 afternoon of work. The Minoans on their volcanic cliff in 1500 BC were doing the same calculation in the only language available to them. The feeling of cool air on their skin when they walked through a whitewashed door, the sound of silence where a laboring machine would otherwise roar, the simple fact that their families were comfortable in a world that provided them nothing but rock, fire, water, and sunlight. The Greek grandmother who climbed her outside stairs every spring with a bucket of lime wash and a wide brush, painting her walls the same way her mother taught her and her mother's mother taught her, was not performing a ritual. She was maintaining a machine, the most efficient passive cooling machine ever operated on this planet. No moving parts, no fuel, no service contract, no monthly bill arriving in an envelope, just a thin coat of white on stone, renewed each spring in the time it takes to eat breakfast, doing its quiet work all summer while the sun hammers everything around it. Professor Ruin at Purdue proved with instruments and peer review and world record certification what that grandmother already knew in her hands and her bones, that a white surface aimed at the sky is more powerful, measured in raw cooling output, than the mechanical system the modern world built a $300 billion industry around replacing it with. The powder that makes this possible is still in a plain white bag on a shelf at your hardware store, a few feet from the paint rollers and the mixing sticks. It costs $7. It weighs 50 pounds. It has no brand ambassador and no advertising campaign and no quarterly earnings report riding on whether you buy it. It is just calcium hydroxide, the same material burned from limestone in a clay kiln on a volcanic island 3,500 years ago, waiting on a shelf between the contractor bags and the wood stain. You mix it with water in a bucket until it looks like thin milk. You roll it onto your roof in 2 coats, with an afternoon between them. You put the bucket away, you go inside. Your great-grandmother painted her walls with it every spring. The civilization that raised the Parthenon cooled its buildings with it. The empire that engineered the Colosseum rendered its walls with it. A university professor proved it outperforms the machine in your hallway, and a world record organization put its name on the finding. The summer comes the same way it always has, the sun arriving at the same angle, carrying the same heat, hitting your roof the same way it has hit every roof you have ever lived under. The only thing that changes is what your roof does with it next.